Welcome to Addicted to Watches. Today, we are going to be looking at a Microbrand homage, but not in the way you might think. This is the Alexander James NDR001. Many watch microbrands and other small brands at the budget end of the market make a name for themselves by heavily borrowing designs from much more expensive, desirable watches, such as Rolex, AP, and even Seiko watches. For many, these watches are a good way to get a taste of those at a fraction of the price. This watch, while a homage, does not homage any of those. This is homaging a fellow microbrand, the Richard Legrand, now RLG, Odyssey. The brand owner, Alexander, was fairly open about this during the initial Kickstarter campaign used to launch the watch, stating that he wanted to make the small improvements to that design that he thought would make the watch significantly better. We'll go through those changes later, but for now, let's look at the history of the brand and the watch itself. The NDR001 is the first large-scale production of a watch by Alexander James Watches. This brand initially began as a watch mod parts store, selling dials as well as pre-modded homage watches. After creating two smaller runs of quartz watches in 2018, the brand launched a Kickstarter campaign in 2019 for this watch, and has been selling it since. There are three dial options for the NDR001, black granulated, which I have here, and features a matte black textured dial, grey sunburst, and white snowflake, which mimics the iconic texture of the Grand Seiko snowflake. The regular price of these watches is $350. However, they sometimes go on sale for $325. And are only available through the brand website. But in this price range, there are many other NH-powered microbrand dive watches to compete with. Does it have what it takes to stand out from the crowd? Let's find out. Getting into the specifications of this watch, it features a 40mm case size with a thickness of 13.2mm, but the domed crystal increases that to a not insubstantial 14.3mm. While this sounds very thick on paper, in reality it sits very flat when on wrist. A compact lug-to-lug of 48mm also helps it wear well. Female end links on the bracelet mean that this length is not increased. The 20mm lug width should mean it's also easy to find a wide range of straps to fit this watch if you want to change up the look. Overall, the watch is very well proportioned, and a slight taper on the bracelet down to 18mm at the clasp helps to balance the weight well. Being a dive watch, the NDR001 features 200 meters of water resistance, with a signed screw-down crown and caseback, and, as mentioned, like many others in this price, features a Seiko NH35 automatic movement. Reliable, hackable, and hand-windable, as well as usually fairly accurate and easy to service or replace when the time comes, this movement is used widely for good reason. Being a no-date watch, however, the NDR001 has a ghost date position when pulling the crown out to set the time. One of, if not the most identifiable feature of a dive watch, is the rotating bezel around the dial, used to time how long a diver has been underwater. This watch features a 120-click coin-edge bezel that is quite easy to grip and turn. The sound made when turning the bezel is very satisfying, and overall feels solid with very little backplay. Like many others, this watch uses a polished ceramic insert that reflects the light, and in combination with the domed crystal, looks very nice when it catches the light. The bezel is also fully lumed, with blue BGW9 lume that we'll take a look at later. Alignment of the bezel is decent, but may be off just slightly to the right of the 12 o'clock marker. The domed crystal is sapphire, and also has a blue anti-reflective coating on the underside to reduce glare and reflections. The doming of the crystal creates some nice distortion at extreme angles. The dial variation that I have here is the black granulated dial. You can see it's a very fine, almost sand-like texture on the dial, and I chose this over the more popular snowflake version simply because at the time I had no black divers in my collection. The hour markers on this dial are all applied, with silver surrounds, and Arabic numerals are used at 12, 3, 6, and 9, with rectangular markers used for all others. This layout is very reminiscent of the Rolex Explorer 1, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. The hour and minute hands are fairly simple fence post style hands with a diamond tipped second hand. All text on the dial is printed in white, as is the logo and minute markers around the outside of the dial. Whilst by no means is there too much text, I think the 200 meters and 660 feet conversion isn't really necessary, and only one would be needed. All printing is done very cleanly and looks balanced. Taking a look around the watch now, you can see that it is definitely going for that tool watch aesthetic, with almost all of the case being finely brushed and just a high polished chamfered edge to break it up. Where the dial takes some inspiration from the Rolex Explorer, the case seems to take some cues from the Tudor Black Bay, with its slab sides and unprotected crown. It's much the same when looking at the bracelet. All top surfaces are fully brushed, and just the sides of the bracelet are polished. The clasp on this watch now is not the original one that it came with. The original clasp is branded, and has polished sides to match the bracelet. However, it is only a pressed clasp. Upgrading it to a milled clasp from somewhere like AliExpress for only a few dollars goes a long way to improving the wearing experience of this watch, an unfortunate cost-saving exercise by the brand. Aside from the bezel, the other identifying factor of dive watches is generally the lume, so let's take a look at that now. The whole watch uses BGW9 lume and glows an ice blue color. The fully lumed bezel insert looks great combined with that dial. While not as strong as the lume on some Seiko dive watches, it is still more than enough to be perfectly visible in low light conditions. Now that we've looked at the watch in detail, let's get it on wrist to see how it wears, and to see how it looks on a variety of straps. As mentioned, this watch doesn't feel as tall on wrist as the height suggests. This may be in part due to the dial being quite a bit further sunken into the case than many other watches. The bracelet integrates well into the case, and overall is comfortable to wear. This black NATO strap with off-white accents matches well with the color of the lume on the dial, and looks great. If you want to go a bit more fun and colorful, this green camo strap looks great too. Being a simple black diver, a wide range of strap types and colors will look good on this watch. You could even dress it up with a vintage style leather strap. So, aside from the fact that it is a homage, the NDR001 seems pretty good. But are there any downsides? Well, as I mentioned, I have swapped out the pressed clasp for a milled one, which was initially disappointing to see. Another thing you might not like is the difference in the daylight lume color between the dial and the bezel. On the dial, the lume paint is an off-white color, whereas the bezel features a brighter white color. This was the first thing I noticed when I saw this watch in the flesh, but after a while, I either got used to it or stopped noticing it. The only other consideration is the price. At $350, it is in with some tough competition from many other microbrands, such as Hemel, Axios, Zelos, and countless others. The microbrand dive watch market is very saturated. The initial Kickstarter price of $275 when it first launched was a good price and an easy recommendation, but at $350 it is a little less easy to recommend. But should we consider the original watch it's homaging? The RLG Odyssey has gone through multiple versions and iterations, and the next version is currently available for the price of $429, but it differs in a few ways from the NDR001 that justify the higher price, and may even represent better value. The new RLG Odyssey features a Miyota 9039 high beat movement, which is superior to the NH35 used in the Alexander James, as well as a domed sapphire bezel insert rather than ceramic, which is more expensive to produce. The case size is also slightly smaller at 39mm and slimmer due to the slimmer movement used. Finally, the Odyssey is available in blue, green, black, and a pastel blue color that reminds me of the Trasker Freediver. At the end of the day, it comes down to whether you like the design compared to other dive watches available at this price, as the specs are pretty common across many watches in this category, and whether you feel that the upgrade to the RLG is worth the extra $80. What do you think? Which do you prefer? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.